So today is technique tags, and to be honest, when I'd said technique tags, I had no idea where to start. And as you can see by everything that's on my desk, um, oh, there I go saying Just ignore the ums, people. It's while my brain is thinking. It's while my brain is engaging. Tim says he has a popcorn brain. Mine obviously runs on pauses, which includes me saying So just ignore them and carry on. I'm going to. So over the years, I have taught many things. Hi, Kelly. I have taught many classes in South Africa on tags. I have also done Tim's Creative Chemistry 101, 102, 103. And so I've got piles and piles of tags. And why tags? Well, because Tim does tags. And why tags? Because, well, they're nice. And you can chop them off. So for example, this one, you can chop that off and put that on a card front, or you can use a piece of it, or you can die cut it. But tags are a nice surface to work on because they are manila. And what do I mean by manila? Manila is a type of paper. Hi, Karen. So paper makes a big difference to your outcome. These are the tags I could purchase in South Africa from a shop called P&A, and these are tags I have made myself with my die. My tags are incredibly orange by comparison to the Ranger tags, which you can see are quite cream. And of course your base is going to change your colors. So this one was done on white, so the colors will be as pure as you can get. But when you start working on a substrate that is of a different color, it is going to affect your outcome. So that's a good place to start, is the paper that you are using. So I am lucky enough to own the original die that Tim came out with for originally for it was the book plate, these book plates, and the number 8 tag. What I have done for mine, because I've actually been through two, because I used to run classes and I used to run this die so many times, I've had to make notes for myself. So I always put my die that way through my machine, because this little tiny piece over here is such a skinny piece of wood that with being forced that way through the machine, it actually broke the wood support and bent it, which is another reason why I have a MacGyver job going on here. Oh, the whole die is actually loose because I've used it so much. So I created this MacGyver job as a support. It's basically a piece of wood that I have put a whole lot of foam tape on so that I can grip it like I did now, so that I can put my movers and shapers in here. So if I want a mover and shaper, I can still use it. So it wasn't a permanent fix, but it was just a support for that die, which was quite weak. And I'm going to turn this over so you can actually see the construction of a die. So these are all the blades, and these are all handmade, people. So these are hand bent in China somewhere in a factory. And that's what a die looks like. And these thick dies are called steel rule dies, and they are very sharp metal blades in there. They can cut you. So please be very careful when dealing, especially with one like this. Oops, I'm trying not to blind you with shininess. Especially when dealing with blades that are exposed. You really can cut yourself. So anyway, so that was I think that's now upside down, MacGyver job to support my piece of thin wood over here. And also I put the foam tape on, not only to be able to grip it to pull it out, but so that my paper didn't disappear in there. Then Tim came out with this set of etched dies. I've only recently just purchased it, and you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sizes and the different add-on. So you can either have your tag without the hole, or when you are working on your machine, that's to have the hole. And then this is those tag supports. So in other words, these rings. over here. This one doesn't pull out. There we go. So that's to support your hole, so that when you put ribbon and things through it, it doesn't pull and break. Okay, yes, the Thinlits die. So the difference between the two physically is that the Thinlits die can cut one piece of cardstock at a time comfortably, maybe two if your cardstock is quite thin, whereas the steel rule blade can cut easily up to 4 pieces at a time, which obviously as a teacher I needed to be able to mass produce, I don't know, 10 tags per person with 20 in a class. I needed to make 200 tags. Is my maths right? Yes, something along those lines. So you can imagine my dies have worked incredibly hard, and that would have just driven me mad trying to do one at a time. I would have been, yeah, at my desk for longer just trying to manufacture the tags than to actually teach the class. Hi, Claire. So, yes, so your substrate does make a difference, and so does what the paper is that you're using. So different papers are made in different ways. And if my memory serves me correctly, manila is made over, it's finalized over a very hot drum. So that's the paper. So paper goes through, you get your wood pulp, it gets put through a machine, dyes get added to it, it then gets spread out really thinly, and then it gets dried in different manners. And that makes all the difference. So if you're looking at watercolor paper, you will get hot pressed and you will get cold pressed. Hot pressed for our creative purposes, for what we want our ink to do, is usually the better option. So if you can get hot pressed paper, that is definitely the way to go as a crafter, because it's quite confusing when you are in an art shop and you're looking for paper and there's like a million different things that are facing you. And in my case now, they're all in German. Sometimes they're in English, depending on where the brand has come from. But, as I keep saying, my German is getting better. So I'm not going to mix these up. These are my plain tags that I'm going to use just now. And one is South African paper. That one. That I don't know where I got that one from, because that is not my die. That must be a bought tag from somewhere. And yeah, so you can feel how smooth the paper is. And I've hit this problem before when I used to teach art journaling. And I used to buy a batch of art journals for class. And every now and again, one journal would have really, really porous paper, which you obviously can't see because it all looks the same. It's just white before you start adding your inks. So some papers will really suck your ink and paint and things in and not allow you to do the technique on top, in which case it's not you, it's the paper. I know they say a bad workman blames their tools, but in this case, true story. So if it's not working and you know the technique should, then yes, we should talk in German from now on. I will just use Google Translate. I'm good with that. I'm getting quite quick with it too. So so I digress. Anyway, moving on. Then I did teach, so yes, we were talking about journals and papers and the differences that it makes. So I taught a mixed media masterclass back in South Africa. So I'm going to start there. I know it's not a tag, but the reason being that I know a lot of people struggle with the colors. And looking at this tag, it's got a whole lot of different colors on it. And I know a lot of people say to me, but I get mud. I get like a mess when I am working with my colors. Why do yours always look so pretty? And it's because if you don't understand or know about color theory, well, you're going to make mud accidentally. So what do I mean by color theory? I'm sure most of you have seen color wheels, and those are equally just as confusing if you don't know what they are. So I have abbreviated the color wheel. This is how I used to teach color theory to my students when they started with me. So if you imagine that this is a rainbow of circles of colors going all the way around, I've pulled out the information in the middle. Most of us can remember what the primaries are, which is red, yellow, and blue. A lot of people think that green is a primary. It's not. And I blame China. Poor China is getting blamed for viruses. Now it's getting blamed for green being a primary. And that's because if you think of children's toys, they are red, yellow, blue, and green. Why are they not red, yellow, blue, and purple? Red, yellow, blue, and orange. If you look at Lego, the original Lego came out like that. So yes, a lot of people tend to think that there are 4 primaries, but green is a secondary because it is made up from blue and yellow. Orange is made up from red and yellow, and purple is made up from red and blue. And what are these funny, confusing arrows? Well, that's what I call opposite colors, also known as complementary colors. So opposite to yellow falls purple, opposite to red falls green, and opposite to blue falls orange. And those colors work well next to each other, because if you mix blue, red, and yellow together, you will get brown. Different shades of brown, but you will get brown nonetheless. And so when you work with your opposite colors, you're also going to get brown. Because why? Purple already has blue and red in it. Add your yellow, well, that's your 3rd primary, brown. Same for red and green, same for blue and orange. Now, when I say they work well next to each other, if we think of Christmas time, red and green is a very popular color combo, and very seldom do you actually mix them wet. So in other words, your tree is green and your baubles are red, and they work very well next to each other. So what I've done here is I have taken some sprays, my distress sprays, and I have sprayed through a yellow through a circle, through a stencil, and I've created this overlap. So here you can see you don't really get a strong orange. It also depends on your base colors, and your purple is really not purple, it's quite dirty, and that's because this red is quite orange. So it's a bit of a misnomer that you will get purple from blue and red. I know a lot of people struggle with that. It depends on your base colors. So here you can see I've sprayed color on my mat and I've dipped it, and well, that's the sprays, this is the distress paint, and here you can see as I've mixed it more, so this was a first print and that was a second print, you can see how brown that is going, because the more you mix your colors together, the more brown they're going to go. So that's kind of an uncomfortable feeling for a lot of people. And when you do spray, try or put your paints down on your craft sheet, try and keep them apart so you know that you're not going to have like 3 colors all mixing together and giving you that brown. So I sprayed yellow, I sprayed blue around the outside, and I sprayed red in the middle. I didn't have too many colors going on. Then we have what I call the printer's colors, which most of us now have color printers on our desks, and they use cyan, magenta, and yellow. Okay, that being cyan, that being magenta, and that being yellow. And they also have a 4th color called black, which in the printing world is called key. So you might have heard CMYK as a term. And with these colors, you are guaranteed to get a really, really pretty purple. And your colors will go less muddy because they don't have quite so much of their opposite colors in them. So you will get a very, very pleasant color combo going on here, because people often say to me, what inks must I buy? And it's a bit like Tim's first distress colors that he came out with were 6 shades of brown. So that's what he likes. It's a very personal thing to ask what colors, so colors that I like. I love turquoise, I love pink, and I love brown. So if you look at my color selection, I'm going to have a lot of browns and blues and only a couple of other colors. Over the years I've built up a few more colors, but I would always suggest that you start with a cyan, a pink, and a yellow. So they're not called that in the craft industry. These are done with actual ink pads, and these are done with sprays. So you can see the slight difference in colors using the same colors in the thing, in the jars versus ink pads. So here what I've done is I have used what I call one side of the color spectrum. So that is to save you getting mud. So what do I mean by the one side of the color spectrum? That is one side of the color spectrum. So you can comfortably have 3 colors on your desk and you won't get mud. Or you can have those 3 colors, or you can have those 3 colors. And you can see here that they work beautifully together. in the sprays and in the paints and in the ink pads. Then we have the complementary or opposite colors, and you can see that each time they go very dark and muddy. And I hope I don't soothe you to sleep. This is my lecture voice. So when you're using, it doesn't matter what you're using. So inks are fairly dry. Even though you overlap them, you will still get a yucky brown color. Distress paints are definitely obviously runny, and where they mix a lot, you will get yuck colors. It will go brown. Same with these are the sprays, distress stains. And so where they blend and mix, you're going to get mud. And I think that's where people really struggle, because they look at the two next to each other and they go, wow, that's going to look really pretty. And then they get mud. And as a crafter, if you just beginning, it's a bit soul destroying, and you think, oh, I can't do this. And you chuck it all aside and you go and read a book or watch TV or Netflix or whatever it is that you've got. So knowing and understanding your base tools is an important place to start. So it's all very well me doing technique tags and just showing you, but if you don't understand this, you are always going to struggle. And then I went on and I did all sorts of different techniques. So each one of these pages, this is distress ink techniques, comparisons. So this is what I like to do a lot. I play Tim's what if game a lot. What if I put gel medium on a book page? What if I use the same book page but I put texture paste on it? And what if I put gesso on it? Then I put my distress ink over the top. What is going to happen? And here I have a visual reference for each one of them as to what is going to happen. I also ran a class like that. And here we have, I did the labels. So this is texture paste with distress ink over it, distress stain over it, distress paint over it, and distress crayon. And I did the same thing with gesso, and then I did the same thing with gel medium, so that you can compare. And at the top here is what is original. So in other words, you can see whether it is, and you can feel it. So that's a texture paste, which obviously you can't feel through the screen, and you can see the gesso is white and the gel medium is clear and kind of smooth and shiny. So it's a good idea to sit and do a couple of example things like this with notes, because you think you'll remember, but I promise you, months down the line, and you'll be thinking, now, was this texture paste? Was this gel medium? What was it, gesso? Because originally when I started, gesso came in white. Now they have clear gesso, black gesso, colors of gesso. So make notes either on the front as I have here, or you can stick them on the back. And in fact, I have got more notes on the back, which is what I gave all my students, as to an explanation of the properties of texture paste, of gesso, and of gel medium. So you can do this kind of research now at home online. It's quite amazing what we have access to now. So that's one of them. Then we did another comparison sheet with different additives to gel medium, texture paste, and gesso. Same additives to the different products. Different mediums. This is crackle paste with different things over the top. Archival ink, water-based inks. So it's quite a good idea to do these kind of experiments without trying to make something perfect. So, and then put them somehow neatly. This is an album. It's supposed to be a scrapbook album. And yeah, so you can do it either with tags with a ring like this. I'm just going to pop that on the floor. I'm trying to read comments. It makes me go to my craftman and working there together. Cool. So I've got a whole lot of these batches of things. So here's all my tag samples that I go to, and these actually are a great way for when you are mojoless to sit and go through all these samples and think, oh yeah, I've forgotten about this technique or that stamp or that whatever. And it's a great way to go back in techniques that you know that you've forgotten about. And when I say I did the CC 102. I was naughty and I didn't stick my notes on the back, but I have got all my notes in an A4 folder. So everything is in here with all of Tim's samples and everything. So I can refer to my folder. It sits right next to me. And the nice thing about this classes is if you want to go back and rewatch it, you can go back at any time. I even made a mini book. So I know, do some of you know how to make what I call the W fold or the M fold book, mini book? This is one piece of 12 by 12 inch scrapbook paper, and I have made a mini book with it. So it depends on how it folds and how you glue it. You can either have a tag at the top or the bottom, and this is one piece of paper that I used a punch for to create my own stencil. So I punched it this way and I punched it that way, and I made this. In fact, here it is. So once I'd even finished using it as a stencil, I had it as a long piece. I then used it in my book. So I used it to create this little mini book with, these are ATC size cards, artist trading size cards, and it's a nice little thing to give as a gift for people. It's really quick and easy. And so if you Google W cards or whatever, you can create, yes, Nubby, you've been in all these classes. So yes, Nubby did the media class with me. So that's the book that I created, but I actually created two and stuck them together and made a little hard cover for myself. And I made, for 101, I made little tiny tags with the tiny instructions here as little memories, just for fun, for myself. So there are lots of different ways that you can store these ideas, and they don't have to be on tags. So I'm going to pop that out the way. Okie dokie. Now, where to start? Oh, the other thing is you don't have to have tons of everything. So you don't have to have millions of stencils, millions of stamps, millions of dies. You can do these techniques with one die, well, one stencil, and a set of stamps. So for example, for this class, let me just find it. I die cut everybody their own stencil using some folder material, you know, those flip files, the more sort of thicker ones like your envelopes. I die cut everybody using this die a stencil, and it's only 2 rows, so I was showing how you could repeat it. And I used one of my butterfly stamp sets. So this is Shrinky Dink, shrink plastic, stamping on clear packaging. And you'll see as I work through, and again there were notes that went on the back, just the same set of stamps, the same set of colors even, so you don't even have to have millions of colors. Here I looked like I worked with mustard seed and looks like maybe peeled paint and a darker green and some gold. And you can see completely different effects using exactly the same tools, just with different techniques. So a lot of people say, oh, I don't have everything, I can't afford to buy it. But you don't need a lot. You can use exactly the same thing in as many different ways as possible. And in fact, that's a challenge I sometimes set myself, to see how many ways I can use the same thing, because the stuff that I have has to, what I call, earn its rent, earn its keep on my shelf. So that's another idea for you guys. And so these are all my technique tags that I've done with the classes. That's another one. These were my own ones that I did with classes. And yeah, so now we're going to, there's one more thing I want to show you guys before I move on to actually doing classes. Oh yes, so Tim's just come out with a book that has like an album that has fabric in it. In South Africa I would go to the fabric shop and I would buy calico. It comes in various thicknesses. I'm still new to finding where various fabric shops and things are here that aren't curtain shops and so on. So I actually went to IKEA and I bought, this is curtain lining. It's basically the same thing, which you can use to stamp on and so on as well. So that is one of the techniques that Tim does. So I'm talking a lot about Tim stuff because that's where my base of knowledge comes from. Tim did the 12 tags of Christmas for many years, and then he did the 12 tags of every year, so every month, once a month. And there's incredible amount of knowledge there. And he did it for 10 years. So there, you can go back to those at any time. They're down the side of his blog. That's if you're on a computer. On your phone, I'm not sure where you'd find it because different platforms show things at different places. So one of the other things I do is, obviously you can't always get hold of the same product at Tim's, Tim's product or whatever, but you can get hold of a local version. So this was when the crayons first came out. This is a die cut that I own, and I used Ranger Collage Matte to glue them all down, and so that I could see what colors the different crayons would come out in, because their packaging is not the same color as the crayon. It's a very difficult thing to try and achieve. It's a completely different medium. It's not like they can go and put the same base pigment into plastic as you can into a crayon. So the manufacturers try and get these colors as close as possible, but it's not always possible. So for myself, I made this color chart. And while I was making the color chart, I made notes on the bottom here. This is using Ranger Collage Matte. This is using Dala Gel Base. In South Africa, there's a company called Dala. And you can see that the color goes down slightly differently. Here it's much smoother. Okay, the colors are lighter, but it definitely went on smoother and better than using the Dala Gel Base. So then here's another page. We're still working with the crayons. I did different colors over here, and that's Ranger Distress. So in other words, everything on this page is Ranger. So the grit paste, the crazing, the matte, and the vintage, those are Tim's collage mediums. And then here, this is Ranger Multi-Matte Medium, Prima Soft Matte Gel, Dala Gesso, and Dala Gel. And then scribbling with the same crayon, so that you get the same result, because there's no point in using a pink crayon, a yellow crayon, a blue crayon, a purple crayon, because something that I know as an artist, because my background is art, is that the different pigments change the properties of the actual thing. So even though the manufacturers use the same product base for the crayon, by adding the pink pigment or the blue pigment or the purple pigment, depending on its nature. So for example, yellow ochre comes from the ground in Australia. So it is an organic ground up rock, basically. There are other colors. A lot of greens come from metals, because you know how copper oxidizes. And those are finely ground little pieces of metal. So depending on what you're adding to the same product, it's going to react differently. And I know a lot of us have had issues with colors changing over time, of distress, not the inks, the liquids, and the stains. And that's because, again, the chemists can't help the different reactions over time of the products that have been added to it. So one color will react and another color won't. So I know, for example, that cobalt blue is an incredibly unstable color if it's not in a mineral base. So if you try and have a fabric paint, for example, that is non-toxic for kids, and there's a limit as to how much fungicide that these people can put into the product. So that will go moldy with time. Whereas if you put the same pigment base of cobalt into a mineral base paint, it will not do that, because the mineral base overrides whatever the stuff is in the cobalt. And also cobalt, depending on the base that it's in, will bleach with anything that is acidic. So these are things that I've learned over time with experimenting. I've got 20, 30 years worth of doing this kind of thing. So a lot of people start crafting, They get all their stuff, they get going, and then they wonder why certain things don't work for them, or yeah. So for me, it's important to understand the base product that I'm actually using and do the what if game. So I think that's where that ends, and then that was a class using crayons. So, and here's another page that I'm experimenting with. So I often use my art journal as a place to experiment and test. Not every page is perfect, not every page is finished, and yeah, what else is in here? That's it. This was a class that I taught all with distress crayons. So Tim recently did a 2-hour dem on his Facebook page, and it's well worth going and looking at it because there's an incredible amount of stuff you can do with it. So he was demoing each technique, and what I've done here is I've taken all the techniques and put them into one page. So I know people ask him to do finished products, but it's quite difficult. This takes an incredibly long time. This was a 3-hour class with everything pre-prepped, and yeah, so it's time consuming. I mean, those of you who were in my live yesterday know that well, I can talk for hours, and it was 2 hours yesterday to finish my thing. You're here to see technique tags, so let's get going. Okay, are there any questions? Nope. Hi, Olga. Woo, you're up early. Sorry, I'm just gonna have some coffee quick. That's good. Okay, so we're gonna start with these 2 tags, and just as basics, and I'm gonna do, for fun, I'm gonna do the same colors on these 2 different tags so that you can see what happens with the 2 different colors. A rule that I taught my students when I was teaching art is to work from light to dark. You don't have to, but it makes sense in my mind, because if you work from light to dark, you can cover a lighter color with a darker color, especially with these transparent inks, but it's very hard to go the other way around. So here we have mustard seed, and put on enough ink. One needs enough color, so that's my mustard seed at the top. And this is one of Tim's hacks, is to put this shelf liner, or gecko mat as they call it in South Africa, on your desk, because then it means that you don't have to keep holding your ink pad to keep it still. So you can see they're both yellow, but this one looks quite lemony and that one looks very warm and almost honey-like. Now I'm going to bring in some of my red, and some of my ink pads are wetter than others, so some you don't have to press as hard or as much. And also it doesn't matter whether you have the old long ink applicator tools or the round ones. It really makes no difference to me. Yeah, it's sometimes a size thing when I'm working through a stencil that makes a difference. And so we have the red going on there. Going to do the same on this side. And I'll bring in some green. So now if I'm going to overlap that, I'm going to get mud. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring a little bit of yellow down the middle over here. And the nice thing is, yes, I said go from light to dark. You can see it is picking up a little bit of the red, which is not ideal, but you don't really contaminate your ink pad. Right, now I can go with my green without being afraid that I'm going to get mud over there. And this ink pad looks like it's been touching something else, so I'll make sure I use this side. Oh, these ink pads are getting old. I'll have to put a fresh one on. And do the same over here. some of my ink pads have been on here. Yes, these ones are ancient. Okay, I'm gonna have to just change ink pads. Let's see if I've got a spare one in front of me. Yeah, when I say ancient, these have been on here and they've done classes for about 5 years. So I'm just trying to look in the things in front of me. Let me just go grab my ink pad. I have a funny feeling that might be happening a lot. Okay, so when you start a fresh one, you need to really give it a good go in the ink to pick up some color. And I usually find it takes a little while before I'm comfortable with a new applicator foam. And okay, so I'm working on the craft mat. Some people work on a piece of paper, and what happens is when you work on a piece of paper, this area over here that your ink pad is going onto is absorbing half your color. So when you're doing this, you're losing a whole lot of color. Whereas when you work on the mat, the applicator is not releasing ink onto there too much, so you don't land up wasting a whole lot of ink. So now I'm going to go into a Salty Ocean. Yeah, my blue is Salty Ocean that I'm using today. The green was peeled paint. The red was candied apple, and the yellow is mustard seed. So in theory, where I go over my red, I should get purple, but it's going to go really dark. So dark is not a bad thing. It just depends on the look that you're going for. And you can see that I go back and back and back and add lots of color. Sorry, I'm just getting rid of where my poor ancient applicator pad had disintegrated. So you can see how very different the colors are depending on your substrate base. So not only does it affect your color, but it affects what techniques you do on top of it at a later stage. And just for fun, I'm going to bring some yellow back in at the bottom. And it's got a little bit of the red still on it from when I worked up there. And now I'm going into the blue, breaking all those rules. You see, rules are made to be broken. So there's the world in theory, and then there's the world in reality. And I live in both. I live in my head in theory, and I live in this crazy world in reality. So sometimes I want to soften where that hard edge has happened. I'm going to come back with more yellow, blend it out a little bit more, and then we'll go back to the bottom over here. Right. Okie dokie. And again, I've got some harsh lines happening up there, so I'm gonna just fade them out with my yellow. It does seem to activate it a little bit and move it around. So there we have the two different tags. So one white, one cream, and this one has a richer, warmer color base to it, and this one kind of softer and more acidic looking, especially on the yellow. Hi Mum, watching from the other room. That's hysterical. So it takes social distancing to a new level when your mom watches you from the other side of the flat. And again, I have no idea how long I've been streaming, because they don't tell you this, and I'm using my phone is normally my watch and my iPad, so yeah, I'm gonna try and go for an hour, but I have no idea how long I've been talking. Okay, so how did I create this technique? Well, I took my tag and I crunched it up. Literally, take your tag and scrunch it in as many different directions as possible. So initially it's quite hard to do that because the piece of paper is really, really stiff. and I love doing this. Yep. So, and then I open it up and I see, have I got enough creases everywhere? Is it kind of evenly creased? No, I need another crease here. So I create one and give it a good old battering. And create some interesting creases.
5 minutes.
Thanks. You can type in the chat. Okay, so I've got 15 minutes to do this because I said I'd do an hour. Right. Okay, so now I've got that nice and wrinkled and crinkled. I'm going to take, you can take, so I would take a darker color. Here I've taken brown. I'm going to use, this is quite dark, so I'm going to go with my black. And I have got 2 ink pads going for my black. Black is one of my more popular colors that I use for accenting things. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and just clip the, and I could do it flat, it would also work, clip the creases. But the reason that I hold it in my hand is I really want to pick up some of those that are not so obvious when it's flat. And then you can get your iron out. It's hysterical. I do have an iron, but I use it more in my craft room than I do for my clothes. And yeah, I don't really wear anything that needs much ironing, and thankfully my husband's not in an industry where they have to wear shirts and suits and things. He's in IT, so he wears t-shirts, and I just make sure that they don't need ironing either. Yes, it's very satisfying to take something and scrunch it up, and sometimes you might need to just add a scrunch here and there to make the creases look more interesting. So I really like this technique. And then of course I always do my edges. I like making dark edges. It frames your tag. So I often use black, whether I'm doing an art journal page or a tag or a card. It just helps to frame it. Or I use a dark brown. And holding it in the air like this allows me to clip the edge. I'm supporting it underneath with my finger and allows me to clip the edge a little bit easier. And then, yeah, as I say, you can iron this, or you can do what Tim calls the bum oven, where you sit on it, on your chair, because that'll flatten it. Okay, so there we go. Once that's stuck on something, it's quite effective. Okay, then we have just normal stamping and inking the splatters. So how do you get these water splatters? Well, it's called Spritz and Flick, and you literally put water in your hand and you flick. And part of the trick of this is to leave it. I normally say count to 10 slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And what that allows to happen is it allows the water to start activating the ink and to create some nice dark edges. If you blot straight away, you won't get those nice dark edges. And then what I do is I use the Diane Reevely trick, which is my whole roller towel, and I roll over it like that. I'm back again. And here you can see that the different types of paper have worked completely differently. So the white paper has released a lot more color than my cream paper has. Also, as it dries, that will get lighter, and it will definitely show more. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is another fun technique that I love. Tim first did this in his 12 tags using this set of stamps, which is now upside down and I can't tell you what it is. It's called On the Railroad CMS 127, but of course you can do this with any one of them. He took this train and he printed it onto some acetate, and then you can stamp, and then you can protect your image with the acetate, and then you can do different colors over the top. So what do I mean by that? I'm also going to show you my latest one, which is not plastic, so you don't have to have acetate. I love this guy, the Professor, and I'm just going to take that out of there. So what I've done is I've stamped the Professor on a piece of cardstock, some scrap, and I've cut him out, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink him up, and I'm going to, hi Bianca! Bianca's been in my classes, so she knows quite a lot of this too. So I'm going to ink him up and print him, and I'm going to do him down at the bottom. Maybe I'll do him off to one side. That'll give me a bit more space on my tag. Remember what I was saying in the rules yesterday about the 2/3 rules? So I'm putting him in the bottom section. I'm not putting him bang in the middle. He would look fine bang in the middle. Give him some CPR. Hope he has printed nicely. Hope that I inked my stamp up well. Ta-da! He's a bit pale, but he'll do. And then I'm going to use my mask, and I'm going to place it there. And I'm going to use this with a different color ink pad. So I think I'll go with the red. And so you can do this with any stamp. Obviously it's easy, you could cut a circle for this one, so you could print this one first and then stamp over the top. So that looks nice and well inked up. And then I'm going to stamp, give him a halo. Let's give him a halo. Mr. Angelic. Okay, there we go. And again, press all the way around. Ta-da! So now you remove that, and he's got a halo. So that's quite a fun technique that I like to do, building layers. So the more layers you have, the more interesting it gets. And I have somewhere in this corner, I have some stencils. One of my favorite stencils is this little dotty stencil called Dot Fade. Tim no longer puts this on. New ones come like this with an etched number underneath. So this is THS 032, and because it's just, obviously it's more expensive to run an extra label for these, so to cut costs they're just etching it in while they are running the laser. So I like to use this to fill in around my edges, and I'm going to go with black, and I'm going to do some here, some over there. I know he's not down here, so I can lift and have a look. Okay, we could do with a bit more. And let's have a look and see what's happening. That's starting to look more interesting. I'm going to run it down here. Now in the middle over here are the bigger holes. So I want some of the bigger holes down here. There we go. Then I want perhaps something a little bit more open, perhaps some of the alphabet. And so now I'm going to put his mask back because I don't want him getting any stenciling. So you don't just have to use that as a stamping protection, you can use it to protect from stencils too. And what color am I going to add now? I think I'll add some brown. I'm gonna add some vintage photo. So I find that this stencil has a lot of little bits that can pick up, so I'm gently wiggling my tool into all the crevices and hoping that it doesn't catch too much. Okay, let's have a little bit down here and let's see what that's doing. Okay, I quite like that. Now it just needs its dark edge. And again, I'm going to use the black and edge it. So that's why Tim calls these layering stencils, because you can layer up as many different stencils and designs as you like. There we go. Right, on this one I would probably cut something out because to stamp onto this one is going to be difficult, but you can still stencil onto this one. It's not going to be that difficult because it's not a bumpy surfaces, and stencils are still easy. So I'm going to repeat what I used before up here. Thanks, Kanchan. Did I pronounce it right? And yeah, I want some of the bigger guys down at the bottom because the smaller ones are not that obvious. There we go. Okay, and what can I add to this one? I've got the pointy hand. Sometimes when I want something really, really black, I use my archival ink because that goes on really, really black, but it doesn't clean off your stencil easily. Not that I'm particularly bothered because it won't come off on anything else, but let's have the pointy hand and let's do it black. Now, I'm not wanting to get the other finger in, so I'm just being careful not to get that in there. So I'm going for a bolder stencil on this one because it's already so busy. There we go. And I would probably cut something out and add it over there. So that's those two. I'm going to quickly run through these, and then so here I used a stencil and I stenciled through it. Then I spritzed my stencil and I printed with it. So you'll get two completely different techniques. Here is working with those opposites that I was telling you about. So you can see where the two colors mixed, you got mud. But you can play with it sort of safely in different layers. So that was a sprayed base and this was an inked mustard over the top. And so yes, as I was saying, all rules are made to be broken. The other thing is you don't have to go all in South Africa we have an Afrikaans term bont, which means bright, like over the top bright. You can stick to a color palette and just play around with one color palette. So that's what I was talking about in this set over here. Okay, I think I might go on next week with a couple of technique tags. As I say, Tim has got a ton of them on there, and I was more interested today on explaining to you about the color theory and paper base, because it does make a big difference to what your final outcome looks like. So these were both white, so they have very similar looks, and this one to me has a richer, warmer look than this one. And yeah, so I'm not going to go on too much. I mean, there are tons and tons and tons of techniques. There are tons, hundreds, if not thousands, of various techniques that you can use. And so I suggest you go and watch Tim's 12 tags. They're not actually videos. Sometimes he adds videos. They are mostly oh, this is, I wanted to show you this one, so I'll do it quickly. This is foil, foil tape, but you can use normal kitchen foil actually. This was an experiment with normal kitchen foil where I put double-sided tape and put my tape down and then ran it through the embossing machine, just to see, for those of you who don't have it. And then you can use, in South Africa we have a Dala chalkboard paint which works really well, or you have black soot, and what you do is you apply it all over. You give it a good rub into all the crevices. So you'll see a lot of my steampunk work has this technique somewhere in it. You need to just make sure that you get it into all the crevices. So you put the paint on. It's a bit like being a surfer, wax on, wax off. So you put the paint on and then you take it off again. So I normally use a piece of roller towel, and you gently buff over the top. And what that does is, and I'm using as flat a piece of roller towel as possible, I haven't scrunched it up, and what that does is it leaves the paint in the crevices and it takes it off the surface. Now it's up to you how much you want to take off. But I just love this technique. It's my go-to favorite technique. I think it has, what tags did I use? I used South African tags that you can't get here. Although they're just stationary tags, or I made my own tags with my dies. I want to show you the project that I made with this that is close to hand. I took my granny's sewing box and I used, so that was this, it's plastic, it's my art box, it's the sewing box that you can open like this. It had a fake wood grain on the outside. It's on my blog, and I did so that I knew what was in what side, because I have different colors and different things on each side. I used different folders. These are long folders. I think they're by Cuttlebug, but the same technique. And of course I used some spray paint to spray the handles, but it's an amazing technique that you can use for so many things. And yeah, I use this a lot. So if there's anything that you guys really want to know, you can put it on my Facebook. You can message me, because I have no idea what I'm going to be doing next week other than painting the heart canvas that I started. And tomorrow we're doing cards. So tomorrow will be more building techniques like this, or any of these, and using them on card fronts. So today was all about the theory, and tomorrow will be all about using them and making them look pretty. Okay guys, hope you enjoyed that. See you tomorrow.